Tom Petty is easily one of my favorite songwriters of all time, and his lead guitarist, Mike Campbell, is one of my biggest heroes. Not only have I spent years enjoying the music of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, but I spent a lot of time analyzing the songs, not just from a songwriter's perspective, but also from a guitar player's perspective. And if I were to pick just one song that condenses all of those things that I think every guitarist should learn, it is this: the song Breakdown from their self-titled debut album from 1976. In my humble opinion, that song is an example of a masterclass, not just in song structure, but also in guitar playing. And I'm going to give you 4 reasons why I think every guitarist can learn from that song. Number 1 is that song shows the power of simple song structure. The song only has 3 chords, and you really only hear 2 of them most of the time. The chords are A minor, G major, and F. And you can even voice it as an F major 7. So if you're going to play an F chord or an F bar chord or even any variation of that open position F chord, just leave the high E string open and it creates this really pretty jazzy version of the F chord. And that's F major 7. Now remember, I said we hear 2 of those chords most of the time, which is just a cycle between the A minor and the G. And that carries like 80% of the song, maybe more. So putting aside for a minute the actual commercial success of that song, if you think about a song that's just so powerful, so impactful, so memorable, and it really is only made up of 3 chords where you only hear 2 of them most of the time, I mean, that just goes to show you that there is immense power in simplicity. And what this can teach us as guitar players is we don't have to make things complicated in order for them to sound good. And another thing, this song is a great example of how to structure a chord progression without using the 1 chord. Now, you may think, wait, isn't the 1 chord A minor? Right? If you were to think maybe that's the key of the song, you'd be half right. Generally, when we're thinking about the key of a song, we want to defer to the Ionian mode, right? Or the major scale, which means that the 1 chord is going to be major. But the thing is, we have A minor, G, and F. And I'll already tell you right now, G and F are not, either of those are not the 1 chord, right? Because none of them really bring the release of the tension, right? So we want to think about it this way. If A minor is the closest thing we can get to the 1 chord, even though it's technically not a 1 chord because it's minor, we have to find the relative major to that chord. And if we're in A minor, I'll just tell you right now, if you don't already know, the relative major is C, right? So if someone were to ask you, what's the key of Breakdown? If you were deferring to the major scale, which is kind of the standard, right? You would say it's in the key of C, even though it doesn't appear in the actual song, because the relative minor or the 6th minor, A minor, right, acts as the 1 chord, because when we're talking about the major scale, the 1 and the 6, the major and the relative minor, they're interchangeable. You can play the notes from the major scale over both chords and they'll all sound correct. Only in major, obviously it'll have a happy major sound, and in minor it'll have a more somber, more emotional sound. So with that in mind, this first chord is actually the 6. And then if we're going to go down to G, that's the 5 chord. So we have 6, 5 in the key of C. And then finally we have that 3rd chord, 4, which is actually the 4 chord. So that's another great thing about the structure of this song. It just shows you that sometimes the 1 chord in a song doesn't always appear in there. But as long as you have the relative minor to fall back on, because the song has very much a minor tonality to it. It's not like a happy, like if you heard a C chord in Breakdown, you'd be like, what? It would just change the entire vibe. But musically, referring to the major scale, which this chord progression is based on, that is how we would structure it out. 6, 5, 4. And most of the time we're hearing 6 to 5. The second thing that every guitarist can learn from this song is it is a masterclass in guitar tone. And I mean this in 2 ways. 1, when it comes to the tone from your hands, and 2, the tone from your amp or pedals. And starting with amps and or pedals, right? Mike Campbell famously used small combo amps like Fender Champs, Fender Princetons, Fender Deluxes, that kind of thing when he was recording. So simple single speaker combo amps to get his tone. And he generally wasn't a big user of distortion. He would use very low amounts of gain that would really complement and allow the tone from his hands to really shine through. So from that end of things, if you want to emulate Mike Campbell's tone, start by erring on the side of less gain. So less gain from your amp, less gain from your pedals. Just give yourself just enough to give you some sustain, but you really want to hear the characteristics of the guitar itself, which your hands are really going to bring out. And on the other end of things, he would use both a pick and his fingers to get this very dynamic tone from the guitar. So the very first lick that you hear in Breakdown, this one right here, I am almost positive he is using his fingers to play that, because the way he attacks the notes, there's such a, like, you can almost hear the sound of his fingers grabbing the strings. And it's really dynamic and like almost like kind of precious the way he's approaching the strings. He's playing very gently. I mean, but he's giving it some attack, some pop, going from playing that first note with kind of a little more intensity and then kind of concluding it in this very dynamic, very, very gentle kind of way, which is awesome. Now, if you were to try that with a pick, it sounds fine, but there's much less dynamics there, right? Even if I were to really think about, you know, how hard or how soft I was picking, this doesn't quite sound the same as, at least to my ears. I can really hear the timbre of the sound of my fingers touching the strings as opposed to the pick interacting with it. So little subtleties like that, which I love. I really appreciate that kind of stuff because I'm a huge advocate for dynamic playing. And your hands are very much in control of your dynamics, which is why the saying, you know, tone is in the hands. What that really means is the dynamics in your hands, right? And it's especially coming from your picking hand. So whether you're using your pick or your fingers, right, you're able to attack the string at multiple sort of intensities so that you get this different kind of tone. So for example, that first note, if I were to really pop it, it's pretty aggressive. But if I were to just gently touch it, the tone is different, right? This and this sound different. Fundamentally, the tone changes depending on how hard or how soft you attack the strings. So setting up your tone this way and dynamically playing the strings is going to be a great combination to get that Mike Campbell sound. And once you found that sweet spot in your rig emulating his tone, this will lead us perfectly into the third thing that I think every guitarist can learn from this song, which is how to make your notes count. Oh, by the way, if you're getting value out of this lesson, do me a favor, hit that like button and consider subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. We got a ton of new lessons coming your way, and I would love for you to be at the front row when they come out. So thank you in advance, and let's get right back to business. Every little lead line and guitar hook that's in this song, in my opinion, is just perfect. It fits the song perfectly, and it's memorable, right? So if you were to hear this, there's a good chance you'll know exactly what I'm referencing just by me playing that without any backing. That is another example of the power and simplicity, not just in the structure of the song, but in the content within. Every little guitar part that's played, in my opinion, is just perfectly deliberate and just fits so well that if I were to cover this song with a band, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't try to add my own spin on it. I would just want to play those parts because in my opinion, there's literally nothing better. So let's take a look at these lead lines, which by the way, are all in A minor pentatonic. And if you know your A minor pentatonic hotboxes, which I've taught in a bunch of videos, you'll find that pretty much everything that we're about to look at in this song is contained within that pattern. So I'm going to start the loop here between the 6 and the 5 chord. Let's play that first little lick. Right? So just that right there. However you play it, with a pick or with your fingers, right? You got this part of the pentatonic hotbox. And it just rolls beautifully, right? And that leads us right into the hook, which is... All right, so with this one, you'll notice it just toes the line of that pattern, right? And, you know, as far as playing this, you know, you could do slides like this. Or one thing I like to do is initially a slide and then a hammer-on. Both of those I think are valid. As long as you're focused on the dynamics, right? Playing it pretty gently, because when you're hearing the chords, the way it comes in is just smooth, you know? like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, can you come up with anything better? I can't. And then he also throws in some extra licks, you know, so. You know, that right there is a perfect example of making the notes count. If I were to add anything else to it, I feel like it would take away, you know, and I'm a big advocate for giving your own spin on things, especially if you're playing covers. You know, sometimes it can be fun and interesting to just like throw your own ideas into something. But this is one of those songs where I would hesitate, because I do put my spin on a lot of songs that I play, but there's some that I just revere so much that I'd much rather just play the parts the best I can than try to add anything to it. Because in my opinion, I'd actually be taking something away from the song if I were to try and add my own spin on it. And finally, the fourth reason I think every guitarist can learn from the song Breakdown is it's a masterclass in groove and timing. And this applies to both the rhythm and the lead parts. Because truly, if I were to tell you how to make your notes count like we did in the previous example, it really all does come down to your groove and your timing, or your time feel. So it's like I showed them something that they themselves would have probably come up with, which is like, you're in at that point. So when you're learning this song, you can just throw the record on and just play over it, or you can find maybe even a backing track of the song on YouTube, or you can even create a loop like what I did. I just focused on those 2 chords because that had really everything I needed to demonstrate everything I'm talking about, you know? And once you hear that 4 chord in there, it even gives you a new horizon of things. So if you were to throw that one into the loop, or find some kind of backing track that uses those chords, that'll give you even more harmonic content to make the simple notes you play, even in the A minor pentatonic scale, sound powerful and meaningful. And even if you're new to soloing, the stuff that you can learn on how making the notes count and like all those really important things that we talked about, it can show you that even if you're just playing a handful of notes, they can sound powerful and memorable, right? Like I said, you hear the hook to this song and you immediately know what the song is. I mean, that's powerful. That's something that will outlive the song itself. And if you need a little kickstart in learning how to solo, and not just in A minor, I'm talking every single musical key you can think of, I actually got the perfect follow-up lesson for you to check out. And here it is right here. This is a free guide on how to instantly solo in any key. And then subsequently, how to solo in those keys, both in major and minor. How cool is that? And by the way, this is yours free. All you got to do is click here to claim your copy, or check the link in the description box. One of the best pieces of advice I ever gotten when it comes to learning how to solo is learning how to listen. And once I started actively listening to the music I enjoyed, it would just feed me ideas. And these ideas would come in handy in pretty much every musical situation I found myself in.